I'm not sure to whom I should address this question, but is anything being looked at to mitigate the effects of tree removal on Adzer Bank and West Hope Hill, and also the inordinate amount of water that flows from the footpath opposite the shop?
I don't know anything about any tree removal on Adzer Bank or West Hope Hill.
I think the answer to the question is no. And let John Lee.
I can only speak about the West Hope Hill when they took out the load of conifers. That is, don't forget, this is a crop that somebody has harvested. As far as I'm aware, it is being replaced with deciduous woods. So actually, deciduous woods are better than furry ones.
I think they've got I think where they have felled those trees at the bottom, they have got a bit of a planted strip. I don't know if that's too.
Yeah, it's not great. Yeah, I think that actually has been a problem because the guy who lives at the bottom of the hill from West Hope Hill, he flooded for the first time last year, and he flooded 3 times in 6 weeks or something. So I think that is a problem, but in terms of there's a lag from it coming from him to flooding his house to then getting to the river. What needs to be done is stop the water, slow the water down as much as you possibly can. And just thinking whilst everyone was been talking now, is that if everybody here had water butts on their drain pipes, had downspouts, and when you know there's a flood coming, you empty them. If everyone had a 250 litre water butt, everybody could hold a lot of water just from what comes off their roof, and then when the flood event has gone, you empty it. Even if it's 500,000 gallons or whatever, it's 500,000 less gallons that's going to be ended up in someone's sitting room. Yeah.
Thank you. Can anything be done to stop the brook overflowing at the rear of the social club? The shop car park is our flood spill, isn't it? If this gets stopped, where does it go? Do I give that to Anne-Claire?
She knows that's where the water comes.
Thank you.
So, is the question, anything you can do about it? I don't think there really is. If the brook's full, the brook's full, short of making it bigger, which, as I said previously, with the quantity of water that comes down, that's not going to help, unfortunately. So I'm sorry I can't give an answer to that.
Why won't it help?
Because the brook can only take what the brook can take. So we can heighten it there. It's still going to come. It's still going to end up coming out somewhere. You can't stop it because there's just too much water for the brook. It can't take the quantity of water that's coming down it.
So if you built a sewage canal alongside the village, that wouldn't help.
Well, yeah, you could build a massive one, but that's just not going to be. It's not got cost benefit. You can't really do that.
So you could build a bigger.
Oh yeah, you could build a massive, and of course you could make something big enough to take it. But is that going to be the cost of that against what you're protecting? It doesn't stack up, does it?
It could be done.
It could be done, but I'm talking about the brook we've got at the moment. I mean, it was obviously enlarged back in the 70s, I think it was. But yeah.
I was just going to say quickly, as Anne-Claire says, the brook can't take any more water than it can take. So we've really got to focus beyond the brook on stopping the water getting there. And Tom's point about water butts is one of those things. If we can reduce the amount of water reaching the brook, whether that's through individual water butts, more attenuation ponds, stopping runoff from fields, cross-slope hedging, increasing the capacity of our soils. And also, if you look at the Wellington Brook, it is a very straight brook. The water is just running down that brook at a very rapid pace. Things that could slow the pace of that water would be creating more meanders in the brook, which is obviously a conversation to have with landowners, which would impact their productivity. So again, comes back to the finances. But those are all things that would then reduce the impact of the water coming out of the shop and potentially prevent it.
Going back to the feasibility study that's been done for the council, that's going to answer some of those questions, like the one you just raised there about a lot of these things have been looked at. So hopefully when that the more the details available, then that will help answer some of the questions that have been raised.
But it could be done. It could be done, physically.
It physically could be done, but whether it's the right solution in terms of its cost, its benefit, is the other question. Yeah.
It's a separate matter, it could be done.
Yeah, and I guess the investigations that we've carried out are that there isn't one answer here. You know, the likelihood is it's going to be a combination of things, and that's the challenge.
But you're not actually...
Challenges, there's no money.
It's the same project.
Well, what we've tried to look at is, you know, each of the different individual options. You know, PFR, you know, is the option that, you know, at the moment stacks up. But that's not to say that, you know, introducing meanders, looking at more offline storage. There's other things that would undoubtedly help as well as, but yeah, they just don't stack up on their own.
Thank you. I'm aware that a couple of people had their hands up. Would you mind saving your questions to the open question time at the end? So we're running short time. Thank you. Has any thought been given to restoring the water meadow between the mill and water villa? It was drained in the early 60s by lowering the mill race.
Yeah, there is two options really. One is just get a bund in and put it across sort of above Water Villa Field across to the water mill, and just make a bit of an attenuation pond just to capture it so it doesn't come out. And then there's the entire length of that field, just turn it into an attenuation pond, but obviously there's a lot of cost to doing that compared to just putting a bund in. I think making a water meadow would be brilliant for wildlife, but it wouldn't hold a lot of water. It would need to be dug out and, you know, have 2 meters deep or something and make it, there's a big overspill. So yeah, it is an option, but it's a cost benefit and whatever the term is, but I'm up for it if it's a goer in the future.
Thank you. We've had some talk about slowing the rate of water flow, so I've got a couple of questions here, a couple of suggestions actually, possible solutions. Leaky dams through the dingle, which take water from Wellington Woods. The depth of the cutting would be ideal for this and along the stream. And the second idea was controlled beaver reintroduction.
Yeah, leaky dams are always a good option. John, did I walk the dingle with you? Is that one of the ones? No, so I'm not aware of the dingle then. But I'd be very happy to follow up with somebody afterwards and do a visit and have a look at the site. Unfortunately, we have concluded the Environment Agency project as of, well, next week. So the funding has been spent, but I'm sure if it did look like a viable option, we could look into potentially funding through some other small funding pot, or yeah, we could look into that idea. So if whoever is the landowner of the dingle, or whether it's nobody.
I can help you with the problem.
Okay, I will be in touch then and have a look at that. And beavers is a much larger topic. So yeah, they've just allowed wild reintroductions of beavers at the moment. It's not something I think the Wildlife Trust is looking at the moment in terms of our project work, but it's something that could be considered in the future. But beavers do an amazing job at attenuating water and creating amazing wetland habitats, and would solve some of the problems or at least contribute to reducing flooding. But that's not something that we are considering at the moment in Wellington. It has to be the right location for an intervention like that, because it will drastically change the farmed landscape, as most of the land within Wellington catchment is farmed. So yeah, it's got to be considered very carefully. because there will be loss of production for whoever, you know, it takes on beavers.
No, just to say that we are doing some work with Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust looking at beaver reintroductions more in Gloucestershire and looking at feasibility studies. So if people are interested, that's the way to look.
I'll just read the next question. What forum and within what framework can decisions be made between short-term disruption of natural habitats versus long-term mitigations, e.g. in the turning of common land into attenuation ponds, SUDs which will return to being good habitats but also will provide flood mitigations?
The author of that question apparently asked it at the online flood question and answer session that Council ran last month, and the answer is in the minutes of that meeting, which I've got here. The answer was the Council is taking a holistic view on nature recovery and our flood response, river restoration and biodiversity programmes are all aligned to ensure the best outcome for the county. We are currently undertaking a survey regarding our local nature recovery strategy, LNRS, opportunity mapping, and would encourage your views. And there is a link where you can give your views, which I have here, if anybody wants it at the end of the meeting. I don't understand the question. What do you answer?
Is that good enough?
No, that's why I re-asked the question, but that's fine.
So on this is something that we come across quite a lot, most recently with Tom's Ponds, where we had to go through a full planning process to get the ponds in the ground. And thank you, Tom, for all your patience through that process. It was a very long process, but we have been working with the council and continue to work with the council to look at that. The Landscape Recovery Project, which is the Y-Scapes project, is going to be doing a vast number of these interventions if we get through to delivery, and we'll come up against every single bit of red tape there is around that in terms of permissions. So we're working with all of those permitting bodies to ensure that that process is considered as well as possible, so that we don't stop doing things that are good because of all of that. So it is a work in progress, I think, but there's work going on.
Yeah, and I guess just add to that, just through the wider work that the council's doing on natural flood management, Beth, the project officer, has, I guess, come up with a whole host of different scenarios and different consents, permissions, etc., that people might come up against. That information is available through our website. It's quite unwieldy, it's quite complicated. There's a lot of organisations, involved, well beyond the council. But what we just try to identify is, at an early stage, the sooner we know, what someone's trying to do, we can at least, guide that conversation and make sure that the ask is framed as best as possible to get the best outcome. But yeah, there's quite a bit of information on our web pages as well, just around that.
Thank you very much. Next question. Widening, straightening and dredging the brook in the early 80s after the big flood in 82 solved the problem for a number of years. I know we've spoken about widening. Is this action likely to be carried out again?
No, because things have changed in the 80s. In the 80s there was a thing around straightening, it all being a bit more artificial. It's recognised that's not the way to go now. Dredging, we desilt if the bed level's not natural, but the bed level in the Wellington Brook is natural level. You're not going to dig any more about because it'll just fill up again really quickly, so it'll be a waste of time. So no, because as Sarah painted, the water goes down the Wellington Brook very, very quickly because it's quite straight. So actually, if it has a slight meander and stuff, then it's much better because it just slows the water down a bit.
Thank you. And at the risk of over-egging the pudding, is there the possibility of expanding the width and depth of the brook to hold more water and, and the enlargement of bridges and culverts which create pinch points?
I think that was asked a bit earlier on. Obviously, we've talked about the widening of the brook and whether it's a feasible option in terms of cost. The culverts, well, you've got the culvert on Bridge Lane, you've got the old bridge just above Causeway, and you've got, and then I can't remember. Well, anyway, there's a number of them through the village. Potentially those could be made bigger, but again, it's down to whether or not the cost of doing that stacks up against the benefit you get from doing that. So I'm sorry, I'm just repeating what's already been said, but that's the reality of it. Because the IDB, like the council, if we want to get any funding to do anything, we have to show that it stacks up. Because most of our funding comes from the EA, and the EA is all about the number of properties you protect against what you're spending. Okay.
Thank you very much. Due to the flooding problem in the village as yet unresolved, I think there should be limitations on new housing / commercial developments in the parish, as the addition of more hard surfaces will only make things worse for all of us.
Okay, so I've spoken to planning colleagues. The local development plan policies that include the neighbourhood development plan policies and the national planning and policy framework require the consideration of flood risk, when making decisions. That said, each application must be treated on its own merits, but planning colleagues recognise this is a really important issue.
I mean, obviously, any planning application that comes through that has to have a SUDS. You have to demonstrate that whatever you do is not going to increase the flood risk to anyone else. So even if you cover everything with hard standing, they are required to put in place the sustainable drainage system, which is meant to be equivalent to what it would have been like when it was a greenfield site.
Is that not already established though that a town plan that is exactly what's happening?
Yeah. There's always these questions about whether the SUDS is going to work, because the SUDS are always based on a model. People model it, they try and predict what's going to happen, and they have to be designed for the one in 30-year event and one in 100-year event, plus climate change. But that's all based on models. Then the SUDS gets put in, it has to be properly maintained, all that kind of stuff. So there are a lot of complications, but I think it's an effort because development does have to happen. But it's not that the flood risk is not considered in that. There are requirements for them to show that they're not going to increase that. But you're right, in places, I don't know enough about Cannon Pine, but there are instances where SUDS have gone in and they're not necessarily doing what they were designed to do.
So who's accountable in that scenario then?
Who's accountable in that scenario? I don't actually know, because if I looked at it from the IDB perspective, we're not a statutory authority in terms of approving these things, but obviously we give consent. So if someone puts an attenuation scheme in as part of their SUDS, which then discharges into a brook that we've got authority over, we have to give consent for that discharge. But we wouldn't be accountable because we gave that consent, because we've done that based on peaceful best endeavours in terms of predicting what might happen. Whether the developer who did it in the first place would be held accountable, I don't know. I don't know if that's ever been tested in.
Yeah, so I know that I'm not talking about the specific issue you're raising there, but I know that in recent times, there have been issues when, as an authority, we've been alerted to flooding that's happened. We've had cause to look back in terms of what should have gone in, what's actually gone in, and in some cases we've had to work quite hard with the the developer just to remedy and make sure that that those issues are resolved. So we've had a couple of examples in the last period where, like I say, we work quite closely with communities and and the developer, and like I say, just looked at the detail in terms of actually what's happened. So we work closely. Well, I work closely with colleagues in Balfour Beatty who look at planning applications from a drainage perspective, and they obviously then work closely with our planning department, and then like I say, in occurrences like that with planning enforcement colleagues as well. So yeah, there's quite a lot of regular ongoing dialogue going on, and I guess we learn as we go on, really.
No, because my impression is when you're doing a planning application, the site is considered
in terms of SUDs. So the site itself is considered, and the downstream side, yep, that's taken into consideration. Now, I will say the problem I have in Cannon Pine is it is the upstream surface flow that is no longer going into sites that have been developed. That water still exists. It still comes down through the gaps. In fact, what was it? The conveyance. Sorry, he's my expert. The conveyance of the water is actually, the volume has increased because it is being funneled through the gaps in the houses. Because it is the upstream side of the surface flow that is creating the problems. And, Cannon Pine, 4 flooding pinch points in what? About 500 metres? Yeah. And we're scheduling now, rumours how we're going to have another 120 houses. Yeah, I'm sorry. This is, now, we are a sustainable village because we have a shop and a pub and a bus stop, but we're not sustainable when it comes to flooding. And it is surface flooding that is the critical problem, not Wellington Brook reaching its banks. It is surface flows.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I can say in response to that, but we can, John, we can talk further. But